What's going on, UCF Night Nation? Welcome to UCF Uncut. We are going to discuss UCF versus Kansas State football preview and prediction on this pod. Really excited to talk about this matchup, and we're going to dive into how we stack up against our opponent. First Big 12 game of the season on the road. It's going to be great. But first, before we break down that game here, we are going to bring out UCF's brew of the night. And in this case, occasionally, we'll try a cider. And that's what this is. This is a homemade apple pie cider with natural flavors. And this is by Cigar City, based out of Tampa, Florida. America's, Orlando's hometown team, UCF, in Tampa. So we run Tampa as always. So what we're going to do here is give this one a try. Let's see. This one is a unique cider. You can get it at Total Wine, I know for sure. Publix possibly. But, always as always, we pour it up and give it a quick taste here to see how we're looking. There you go. Nice. Okay, put this can up here. Let's see how we're tasting here. Wow. Apple pie. Homemade apple pie. That's the name of it. And the percentage, just so anyone's interested, 5.65%. So for a cider, pretty high. It tastes like... It tastes like, like a real nice southern apple pie, but it's not as sweet. It's actually really enjoyable. I like this a lot. So out of always, we give a ranking, 1 out of 10, 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. We're going to go ahead and give this an overall rating of an 8.95 out of 10. Very good. I would love to have this on draft. That would be awesome. If you tried it, let me know in the description. It's really good. I would definitely get it again. Very, very good, especially for those cider drinkers out there. All right. Now, let's get into the good stuff. UCF and Kansas State. The thing about this podcast, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't. Share it with your friends. Night Nation, we're trying to grow this thing slowly but surely and organically. The difference in this podcast is that, I really dive into the numbers, of our opponents, and I'm looking at particular things, and we're going to go over them and trends. And then I give an honest take on what I think the outcome is going to be in each match. So like last week with UNC, I was spot on with the prediction of the game score and have been on the record of UCF being 3-0. I had us beating North Carolina in my preseason UCF overall schedule rank of what I thought we would, how we would finish, and that was 9-3. I did have a couple 50-50 games. This game at Kansas State was one of the 50-50 toss-ups Scott Frost is known to pull off an upset when he's on the road. But I had us losing this game originally. However, and we will get into my final prediction score, but Kansas State is not near as good as we thought they were going into the season, and I think everybody can agree on that. So this Kansas State team, let's take a look. UCF is 3-0, and Kansas State is 1-3. Kansas State's schedule so far, they had some interesting losses. Week 1, they played Iowa State in Dublin, and they lost by a field goal. It was a defensive battle, but they lost that game. So you can't put too much stock in that. It was an international travel game, first game of the season. Their running back went out quickly, Dylan Edwards, and he didn't play in that game. So that was a very strange game. So let's kind of throw that one aside for a second. And in week 2, here's the most interesting game of all of them. They're at home. and they're playing North Dakota, a really good FCS school. They're Division I, but they're in the FCS, not FBS. So it's a lower level of competition. And they won 38-35. Kansas State won. That was their first win at home and their first win of the season, and they barely beat an FCS school by 3 points. So that is a really interesting score, and it's an indictment on this Kansas State team. Then at week 3 at home again, they lose their first home loss of the season. They lose to Army, a service academy. And it's a bad Army team. This isn't a great Army team like we've seen in the years past. This is a really bad one. And their only thing they can do is run the ball. And I think Kansas State knew it but couldn't stop it, which I think is going to be huge for this UCF breakdown because Army came in and just ran the ball, and they won the game. And that was on the road at Kansas State. So maybe that environment's losing its teeth a little bit. And then week 4, they lost at Arizona in a closer game. The score was 23-17. So Kansas State is 1-3. And their only win is against an FCS school. And they barely beat that FCS school by a field goal at home. So pretty interesting. So far, trends 1-1 at home. They could easily be 0-2 if they had lost that game to North Dakota. So pretty interesting. But let's take a look nationally at this Kansas State team. By week 4, we got a little bit of a sample size kind of how this team is, looking on a national level. I love looking at the national overall rankings of teams by position and then breaking down really just every category you possibly can, to get a good idea of where this team's at so far in the season. And that's what we did here with Kansas State. So looking at their offense, in the Big 12, they're dead last in offense. Dead last. But let's look at the nation. So in the nation, their offense in passing yards is 83rd in the nation. They're averaging 212.8 passing yards a game. In rushing yards, they're 120th in the nation. Only rushing 108 yards a game, which is not very good. And their total passing yards and their total yards per game, passing and rushing. So total yards per game, they're right around 320 yards a game. Points for, they're scoring 24 points a game. Nationally, they're ranked as the 79th offense in the country. So they're not great on offense. They're dead last in the Big 12 on offense. What's interesting is their rushing yards. They were only able to rush for 108 yards against some pretty suspect teams, except Iowa State's run defense. Iowa State has a good run defense. But besides that, Army, Service Academy, they're going to give effort. But I wouldn't say their run game is that stout. North Dakota, FCS school, no excuse for that number being that low. And we're going to dive into that game in particular. But overall, and Arizona's never been known to have a great run-stop defense. So really, they're struggling to put up rushing yards. And UCF's defense might have an opportunity here because I think UCF's strength is in our secondary and in our D-line, but really our secondary. And if we can get them one-dimensional where they can't even run the ball, they're going to have to start throwing on 3rd and long. And that's when Sincere Edwards and Najee Kelly can really get after that quarterback and cause some havoc and maybe some turnovers. So pretty interesting. So their offense, dead last in the Big 12. Not good for them. Now we're looking at their defense here, and it's not much better here either. I love From Home Alone. He gets in the taxi cab. He's having a very frightful time. He's very scared. And the taxi cab driver turns around, and he's like, "It ain't much better in here, kid." And he gets scared and jumps back out of the taxi. It's kind of like that with their defense. It's not much better than their offense. They're ranked 12th out of 16 teams in the Big 12. So pretty much bottom of the barrel defense as well. They're allowing a whopping 352 yards a game on defense. Not good. That is not going to win many games. And if you think about it, look who they played. It's like, yeah, Iowa State, okay. Iowa State's a good offense. Army runs the ball. That's all they do. So they're not going to put up a ton. North Dakota put up 35 on them at Kansas State. So their defense is suspect. There's a lot of tape out there for UCF, and I know that they've been diving through it, and they're looking for continuing ways to expose this defense. Arizona, decent, they could put up some points, and they did, but they're allowing 177 passing yards a game, and they're allowing 175 rushing yards a game on average, and they allow 26.5 points a game. So that's a vanilla right down the middle, both sides, passing and against the run, they're suspect. If any offense wants to have a good day, they're going to put up 200 yards passing and 200 rushing for 400 yards, basically, because that's what they're averaging, and they haven't seen an offense like UCF yet, and they haven't seen a defense like UCF yet either. We're different than Iowa State. Our defense is much more opportunistic. We're faster, and we create havoc. And I think we have a lot more athletic players across the board, especially, believe it or not, at linebacker. So I think it actually really will be in UCF's benefit in this matchup. So their defense, not too hot. Nationally, they rank 79th in the country, and their offense is 79th. So really, out of Power 4 schools, they're basically like near the bottom for both categories, offense and defense. Now, they do have a bright spot. It's their special teams. Their special teams is ranked nationally 19th best. That's mainly to do with their kicker. And also their kick returner. And basically, I think, really, it was just one kick return. They had one kick return for 99 yards and a touchdown. But they're averaging 33.9 yards a kick return, and they're ranked second in the Big 12 for kick returns. So that's something we got to look out for. I know our special teams coordinator is honed in on that stat and basically their success at returning the ball. And we cannot be sleeping against this team because they will make you pay. And that's an easy way to lose the game. And it's frustrating to watch when most of the starters aren't on kickoff return. And then they have an explosive play or they flip the field on a kick return. So we're not going to be sleeping because I think the attention to detail on our special teams is the best it's ever been. Okay, punting for them, not great. And punting, their punt returns are not great. They're only averaging 5.6 yards a punt return, so not good. Let's see here. Offense. We're going to look at some key players for these guys. Everybody knows who Avery Johnson is, unless you've been living under a rock. He hasn't had the year I think a lot of people thought he would. I think a lot of people thought Kansas State was a shoo-in for the Big 12 championship, and that is not the case. He has digressed as a quarterback. He's gotten worse, really, really bad, and it's gotten ugly. So let's take a look here. On the year, he's passed for 851 yards on 127 attempts. He's averaging 6.7 yards a pass. He has 6 touchdowns and 1 pick. He's been sacked 3 times. And, his rushing hasn't been great either. He's supposed to be a dual threat guy. He's had 25 carries for 62 yards, and he's only averaging 2.5 yards a carry for 2 touchdowns. That stat there, only averaging 2.5 yards a carry, sounds very familiar, and it should. UCF held UNC rushing game to 2.5 yards a carry last game. So, yeah, we're going on the road, but looking very, very similar to what could potentially happen to the rushing game for Kansas State and against this rush defense that UCF has, which is looking stout. So let's take a look at their running backs. Here's a little bit of a wrinkle that is worth noting. Their running back, Dylan Edwards, he was coming into this year as basically filling in to be the bell cow running back. But his size isn't really saying he can hold up as a guy getting 20 carries a game. And so last year, he was successful when he did get the ball. He rushed for over 500 yards, had 5 rushing TDs, and he can catch the ball. He had 133 reception yards and 2 touchdowns last year. Game 1, he gets injured right away against Iowa State, and he hits the bench. Last week, he played limited action, and it looks like he was listed as questionable, but he will play. The injury report came out today, Thursday, 9:25, and he is going to play. He's going to suit it up. The thing is he is not meant to, again, get carries at, I think he's a smaller running back. His size, he's not that big. So he's getting banged up quick, and that's what happened. I think he got banged up, and I don't know how big of an impact he's really going to be in this game, but it is something to see. Their rushing attack stats really factor the other running backs, not him, because he hasn't played since really game 1. He played a little bit last game, but that was about it in their game against Arizona. So, we'll see how Dylan Edwards does. I know we'll keep an eye on him, but I'm not too worried about their running back room as of now, and their O-line as well. So we'll see. Receiver-wise, they got basically 2 guys, maybe 3, but we'll talk about 2. Their number 1 receiver is Jace Brown. He has 25 catches for 284 yards. He averages 11.8 yards a catch, and he has 2 touchdowns on the year. Their second guy, a little bit of a drop-off. 13 catches, 157 yards, and 2 TDs on the year, Jerome Tibbs. So Jace Brown is their guy. So we got Avery Johnson, quarterback, Dylan Edwards, running back, Jace Brown, receiver. Those are their 3 guys. They also have a tight end, which is actually more of a factor than maybe people think. His name is Garrett Oakley. Kind of cool name. He has 12 catches on the year for 110 yards, no touchdowns. So a little bit of a security blanket kind of guy. Bad news for Garrett Oakley. We have very fast athletic linebackers, and they're basically like almost having another safety out there. So Garrett Oakley might get boxed out, and we might get a pick on him if they try that. If we really anticipate Avery in the 3rd and long situation, he tries to dump it off to the tight end over the middle, and maybe it gets snagged and picked. We'll see. Hopefully it does. Now their kicker. I mentioned they have good special teams. Their kicker, Luis Rodriguez, he's been good. He's been really good. He's 11 of 11 on extra points this year, and he's 4 for 4 on field goals. His long was 51 yards. So he's a good kicker. They're going to be able to kick the ball from distance, and he most likely will knock it down. So that's something to be aware of. Easy points for them. If they get close enough, they're gonna put this kicker out there, and he's probably gonna knock it down. So that's something we need to be aware of. Their punting is below average. Their average punt is 37 yards. Like I said many times in this pod, punting, you want to have an average of over 40 yards. Our punting is right around 40 per punt. Some of the best punters we're seeing above high 40s, low 50s. Those are the guys, P4 top programs in the country, that are flipping fields. We need to see our punter at UCF do better, but their punter, he's only averaging 37 a punt, not great. So really it's their kicker that's the one we need to worry about. Defensive players to watch out for on this Kansas State team. They got a couple. Nobody really jumps off the page. Let's see here. Here's one. Toby Asunasami. He's a D-end. He leads the team with 3 sacks, and he's got a fumble recovery and 16 total tackles. Not bad. They have 2 linebackers that lead the team in tackles in total. They look like, standard, Big 12 linebackers. Austin Romaine, he has 37 tackles and a fumble recovery. And Desmond Purnell, he has 28 tackles. So nothing crazy. And their starting safety, Kwa Moss, he has 1 pick for 13 tackles. So, okay. Again, North Dakota put up 35 on them recently at K-State. So not too much to write off of about this defense, who's dead last in the Big 12. Now, here's some red flags for K-State. I love going over the red flags. of a team that we're playing, and just to see, what are some issues that we notice. And here are some. Their third down efficiency is horrible. They're 15 for 48. That's a 31% third down efficiency. 31%. For third down efficiency, Division I, Power 4 school, you want to be above 50% on third down efficiency. Above 50. That's good. If you're under 50, it's okay. But if you're under 40, if you're in 31%, that's very, very bad. It's like bottom of the barrel in the country bad. So they cannot convert third downs. And guess what? It ain't much better on fourth downs either. They're 5 of 13 on fourth downs. They're 38% conversion rate on fourth down. So they can't get third down conversions for firsts, and they're not really getting fourth down conversions either. So that means they're really either turnover on downs, basically a lot of turnover on downs, or they're punting, and their punter's not good. So they're going to lose a lot of field position like that, and they're going to lose a lot of games like that. I don't see that changing. These are 4 games into the season, and they're coming off a game that they had to travel to go to Arizona, so they're going to be a little tired too. Now, another thing to look at for them is that, they average 32 yards a game in penalties. Not that much, but also enough where they could cost themselves a game. They are a penalized team consistently. So pretty interesting. They're also losing a lot of time of possession in games. They average 24 minutes. That's a low time of possession. Again, like I've said, it's not the end of the world if your time of possession is lower than your opponent and you lose the time of possession with the ball if you have a fast offense. But they're just not converting on third and fourth down, and they're punting, and their defense is on the field a lot. So losing time of possession, very interesting, red flag for them. And also, when they fumble the ball, they lose the ball. They lose the ball, and it turns into a turnover. On the year, they have 5 fumbles, and they lost 4 of them. So there's only been 4 games, and they fumbled the ball 5 times. Not good. They're turning the ball over. 4 times they've lost possession on those fumbles. So there is a lot of red flags about this Kansas State team. Now, we're going to get into the UCF Kansas State prediction. I was looking at a particular game that I think UCF kind of stacks up very similar, and it's the Army game. They played Army at Kansas State, okay? And I think this is the blueprint for what UCF needs to do. And if we can execute this, and I think we can do much better, we could win this game by multiple scores. This game could get out of hand. Kansas State fans could be leaving for the exits before the half. I mean, that's crazy to say, but hear me out. Okay. What did Army do to beat Kansas State? They beat them on the ground, right? And we know that. Army's a service academy. They can't really throw the ball. What do? They run that triple option. Well, they rush for 237 yards. Army rushed for 237 yards on the ground. 2 touchdowns. And they only passed for 95 yards in 1 touchdown. So I'm thinking, here we go. Can UCF put up over 200 yards on the ground if Army could put up 237? I think so. Can we pass for more than 95 yards? I think so. And let's look on the flip side. What did K-State do against Army? They couldn't run the ball. They only had 74 rushing yards against Army at home. Only 74 rushing yards? I mean, that is brutal. And yeah, I get it. Army's usually good at stopping the run because they're very, very hardworking. They don't give up, and they're pretty sound, and they know, technique, and they know what gap they need to be in and assignments they need to be in. So, the biggest thing is K-State, they struggled to move the ball against Army's secondary in the air. And Army does not have a good secondary. They're suspect. That's their weakest link, and it always is, because usually they don't get the best athletes at Army. So their secondary is suspect, and K-State struggled to move the ball against them. They went 15 for 25 for 172 yards, a touchdown, a pick, with a 60.8 QBR against Army. When you break it down, they ran for 74 yards on the ground. That's it, just 74. Our defense could do just as well. Let's say we do just as well, and we hold them to 74 yards on the ground. I think our secondary is not going to give up 172 yards in the air. And I think our secondary is much better than Army's. And I think we're going to put on a lot more pressure on Avery to turn the ball over than Army did. And Army got a pick and held him to a 60 QBR. And he only passed for 172 yards. So I think if we could rush for 200 yards, and our average on the year is 202, I think that's fair. If we can pass for 150 yards, our average is 247 on the year. So that's saying we don't even need to pass near what we average a year on this defense, and I think a lot more is going to be there. If we connect on a long ball, which we haven't really done, this could be a huge multiplied factor in this score. But let's just say we hold them to the run game, right? They can't run. They rush for 74 yards against Army. So if they try to run against this defense, probably going to have a similar situation with UNC where they average 2.5 yards a carry. They're going to be behind the sticks on third down. We're going to send pressure. Avery's going to be running for his life, and turnovers are going to happen. Or we're going to get TFLs, sacks, fumbles, picks, havoc. It's going to be good. So what I think is super interesting is like Kansas State just lost to Arizona, who put up exactly what I think we should do. Arizona rushed for 234 yards on K-State and threw for 178 yards, and they won the game, 23-17. So I think if you look at it, Kansas State really doesn't allow much sacks, but the QB pressures are really what gets Avery Johnson. He looked terrible against Arizona. His worst outing of the year. He had 88 passing yards against Arizona. 88. And he rushed for negative 16 yards. He had an 11 QBR against Arizona. So if you're him mentally, you're 1-3. You just went over to Arizona and got absolutely demolished as far as a quarterback psyche. And now you're playing UCF with some incredible statistics nationally with their rankings. Let's get into them. UCF's offense is passing 247 yards a game, 55th best in the nation. UCF's running game, running for 202 yards, 38th best in the nation. Here we go. UCF's points on offense, 31st best in the nation. And here's my favorite of them all, UCF's defense. Alex Grinch has this unit ranked 6th in the nation in points against. We're only allowing 8.7 points against. 8.7, not even 9, 8.7. So I would have to think our defense is better than Arizona's, and I think our offense passing is better than Army, obviously. I think our rushing is probably very similar to Army as far as the success that they had on the ground. So with all this being said, I originally had this game as a loss for UCF or as a 50-50 toss-up on the road as a game we could win to be, instead of being 9-3, we would be 10-2. People thought I was crazy. But with I can't and literally just come up here and be like, yeah, well, I said we were going to lose before the season started. Now when I look at the numbers and I'm breaking down everything, I just can't, say UCF's losing this game because I don't believe they are. I believe they're going to win the game. I think they're going to win the game by a healthy margin. But I'm going to say, conservatively, my final score prediction in this game, UCF is going to score 27 points and Kansas State is going to score 17. So final score, UCF 27, K-State 17. UCF is going to win by 10. and they're going to be 4-0, and they're going to be 1-0 in the Big 12. I'm really excited for this game. Go ahead and subscribe, drop your prediction on the score, and let me know what you think. All right, Night Nation, charge on. Can't wait for this game.